So welcome. I want to welcome you to the Arts Business Collaboratives Speaker Series. I'm Lydia Tyler, Programs Manager at Arts Business Collaborative and the GAP programs. And this is Rising Tides Research Institute, our research arm's third installment of a 2022 Better Conversation speaking series. And we're calling this one Advocacy in Action. So how artists imagine and realize the tools for creating collaboration and working with arts organizations, in collaboration with arts organizations. So today I am here with Marla Robertson. And I will acknowledge in the space that we advertised that we would have Marla in conversation with Jonathan McCrory, who is the Executive Artistic Director of the National Black Theater. We hope to welcome him into the space when they arrive. But Marla Robertson, I want to give you a little bit of a brief rundown before we start this conversation of who she is. So Marla is a native Memphian who moved to the Northeast in 2009 as an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer in Pittsfield, Mass. She has a master's degree in anthropology with a certificate in museum studies from the University of Memphis, as well as a Master of Science degree in education, teaching English to speakers of other languages from the City College of New York. Marla is a co-creator and performing artist with the Brooklyn-based Creole Dance Collective under the direction of Veronique and Nace. Marla moved to New York in the summer of 2018 and is a New York City teaching fellow. She's had many appearances with Creole Dance Collective, as well as Marla has also taught as a teaching artist, taught at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, the Berkshire Dance Theater, and Williams College. I want to welcome Marla into the space today, and I'm excited to talk with you and think about this idea of collaboration, how arts organizations and artists collaborate, and some best practices for that based off of your experiences. You've worked and taught in many different places, and so I would love to hear more about some of these experiences and specifically around how you were able to create healthy collaborations with other arts organizations in your work.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. It's real simple if you think about it, especially if you're not in your hometown. I'll start when I was in Memphis, still a grad student, still, trying to actually like put my hand on the pulse of, what I thought my community was. I was still in school and I was working at a museum, and I was also dancing with a company in Memphis. And I started to notice the overlap between all of these little buckets that I was in. And instead of, I guess leaning more into how tired I was because I was all over the place, which would be my life sort of in Massachusetts as well, after moving. I just started to think about, well, how can these things work together and, kind of help me to, hone in on some additional goals and interests that I didn't know that I had. So I wouldn't call myself a visual artist. I've taken an art class, but I knew some visual artists, before I left Memphis. I knew a really small, talented group of Black visual artists who were, putting on shows and showing their work. And from that, you get a sense of some of the shared interests and goals that you have with this community. And then from there, I saw, well, this is from a small little art show, I realized, well, you work in a museum. I was working at the Pink Palace Museum at the time. And, I realized they don't do things like this at the Pink Palace. But what they do try to do is tap into the history of Memphis, and they have like a small little show about, or a small little exhibition about Memphis history, figures in Memphis history. And so continuing on in the circle, I was still attending the University of Memphis, and I had performed at the University of Memphis with the company that I was dancing with. And so I figured, a lot of the tools that I was already using and would continue to sharpen as I moved around were interconnected. And I had to really take some time to honor that connection and see, well, I know this person from the University of Memphis, they are an artist. So let's use our shared interests and our shared experiences in art and our inspirations in art. I don't paint, but I do get inspired by color. I do get inspired by design. As creatives, we probably design a lot more than we realize. And so the overlap of design and, fashion and those connected creative themes, I guess, come together. And when you want to, get into a little bit of politics and you want to say something and you want to, make a statement. So first, at the risk of sounding like I'm rambling, I would just have to say that I had to really think about the things that I was noticing in the communities that I was in, instead of trying to figure out how to recreate the wheel. We're often told, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if you can pull from the community that you're in those tools that feed your creativity and fuel, I guess, or continue to fuel some shared interests or goals or experiences, I think that that's the best start, instead of thinking you need to create this brand new idea, which, yes, those are useful too, but see what's going on in the communities that you belong to first. And if you see that there's some overlap and you can connect this person with this person and this person, that's also awesome. So yeah, I'll start there.
I love that you just said all of those things. And we are here. I'm going to bring Jonathan the space. Hold on, give me one moment. Yay. I'm so excited. So I'm going to briefly introduce you, Jonathan, and recap this conversation that we just started, the Scrape the Surface, that I know you're going to have many things to share about it. Do you listen, friend? Take your time. I thank you for the space and the time that you've made. Also, just let you know that you and Marla have a common connection through Nambi, who also says hello.
Ashe, Ashe.
So I'm going to briefly introduce you, Jonathan, really quickly to the space. So Jonathan McCrory is the Associate Artistic Director of the Barbara Ann Tier National Black Theater. And he's been in this role since 2012. Currently serving on the nominating committee too for the Tonys and the Lucille Lortel Awards. Throughout his career, McCrory has worked professionally as a director, a producer, and an actor. McCrory is a Washington, D.C. native, attended Duke Ellington School of Performing Arts, where he trained in musical theater and theater production. He earned his BFA in acting and Africana studies at New York University Tisch School of the Arts. And he has directed numerous professional productions at his theater. I am so excited to bring you into the space. So Marla and I were just talking about collaboration and what are the first steps. And as an artist, Marla talked about looking to her community. And I love that she put in into that the time that it takes. You said something that you took the time, right, to not kind of recreate the same things that are existing in the dance world or in the museum space. She noticed the buckets that she was living in visual art, in dance, and still being in school, and the connections that she had in those communities, but then took the time to see where the connective tissue was to then create something, or even whatever that is that you then, what the next step was. But it sounds like that you looked within yourself and within your community before you looked outside of yourself to gain collaboration, or to, the way we think of like applying and reaching out to an organization like the National Black Theater, right? She took the time to find what it is in front of her in her community. And so I bring that to you as well. When you, representative of an arts organization, are looking to collaborate, what is something that you are looking for as well with artists or individual creatives? What's that first step of understanding how to work together to have a more, I would say, an experience that's more in alignment with what your mission and vision are?
So I wanna be so grateful for grace, because with the grace allows for with everything that's happening in this world. So I deeply appreciate the grace to show up in this room and to be present to speak. I think that part of that is what is necessary when thinking about developing with community is grace. How do we implement grace as a durational practice? How do we actually think of the relationship as the durational one? Where do we actually see the extension of self-care and aftercare as part of the practice when working with community? We enter into spaces and we reap the benefit of their beauty, but then we don't actually figure out how we are replenishing it. And I think it's a durational practice, a durational process. It's not popcorn style. We're talking about a marathon, not a sprint. And so that when we're talking about humans, when we're talking about communities, we're talking about humans. Humans develop over a period. And I think that sometimes when we really center and really like amplify this notion of creative ideation, creative imagination, and this notion of just creating work, especially after this shutdown, especially in the midst of two pandemics, especially against a war, especially against economic instability, like against all of those different waves and pressure points and notions of being, we are being met and being asked to truly be confronted with our discomfort, right? And so then how are we building community in that moment? How are we actually having a durational relationship with a love affair, as Dr. Barbara Antier would say, with ourselves? And how is that love affair actually allowing for us to be a reflection of our God force, our inner child force, our love force, our future force? How are we being futuristic in proofing and proving to our future selves what sustainable practices look like? So when I think about building with community, I think about all those things. All those things are necessary because we're living in a time period where the decisions that we make radically change, shift, and alter the future as a possible destination for a livable economy and civilization to actually thrive in. So like it becomes important to think about what recycling looks like. It becomes important to think about how we reuse our set pieces. It becomes important to think about how we're creating health care practices for our artists. It becomes important to think about how we are doing aftercare, because if we're not creating awareness for us to understand that the very presence of our breath is an affirmation that there's something more for us to do, then we're robbing the time that we have to correct and actually create futures of possibility for us all. So that was a lot that I said, a little bit that I said, but that's what when I think about building with community, I think about those terms of engagement, those terms of care.
I would love to hear any thoughts that came up for you, Marla, in that response, because I'm also hearing this connection of time and what you were both sharing before. So I'm just going to toss it back to you, Marla, and some things that as an artist you're saying yes to, and organizations and partnership with organizations in a space, like an experience that you had some of what Jonathan is describing.
Thank you for all of that, Jonathan. And thank you for being here. I'm super excited to continue this conversation. That was a lot. That was a lot. And it's like, it was an awesome reminder that, yeah, first thing on the list needs to be self-care. It really does. And I'm still learning that, actually, as an artist here in New York. You know, I was just sharing earlier, I'm from the South, and down in this, you know, it is slower. Yes, it's slower. It is. And we don't always think about some of the things that I think about now that I'm living here in New York. Um, I am I'm constantly faced with like those decisions that you're talking about. Like what is my life gonna look like before I start a project, and what is it gonna look like after I start a project? And I don't seriously think about it as much as I should, but I know that these questions are still gonna come up. And so and this is a question that I have used in my research practice, my self-care practices, and it just so happens to be the underlying question that we use in Creole dance. What does it mean to be well? Like, what do you need? And I had to really think about this during the pandemic. What do I need in order to be well during this time where I'm not supposed to leave my house? You know, what did I need in order to feel like I could still present work and do work? My ability to move was a little limited, and so I really had to think about what what questions, or what form of inquiry can I put myself through in order to answer that question. What do I need in order to do the things that I need to do, in order to make powerful decisions, in order to recognize who my collaborators should be, to recognize the shared experiences that we can use as inspiration to, you know, fuel our work, to fuel more conversations that need to be had around self-care, around, you know, just care of artists, proper care, proper resources, um, proper ways of getting insurance, proper ways of just getting access to different services and things that, you know, we don't always have at our disposal. So yeah, that
And if I was just to uplift some of the, like, just to add on, to add to the gumbo that you're uplifting, is that what does it mean also to make a decision not to do anything, right? To actually say my care is rooted in a space of radical stillness and radical unproductivity, and that my unproductivity should be honored as a way of truly creating systematic futures for me to be productive in. And I think that the pandemic was a challenge to that, right? Because Sade Lifcott, the CEO of MBT, would say, you know, the power of the Black body in this moment of the shutdown is to understand that I do no longer have to labor, and that I'm still valuable if I'm not laboring. That I have a conversation for the first time as a Black I'm not even Indigenous, a Black person of African American descent, born out of a lineage of slavery, rooted in a practice of creating conditions to always labor to create the safety economic system for this country of Western capitalism. What does it mean in this moment to privilege my ancestors by not laboring and by just resting? And I think that's a question we still need to ask ourselves, because many of us didn't even have that conversation, and or we are entering into the practice of this reopening in the midst of, again, two pandemics, a war, economic instability, and also the list goes on and on, laboring even more than we did before, taxing the spirit more than we did before, not acknowledging the grief that was actually provided to us in droves. And if we were to scratch the surface, the unwellness that lives inside of us. And I love the fact of what do I need to be well, that question. And inside of that, I would uplift this beautiful definition that LaShawne's Broadway actress LaShawn said about what self-care means to her. she was like, self-care, the definition of self-care to her is consistency. Not what I do, it's my consistency in doing it. That my body, my spirit, my mind, my emotional self are consistently able to count on that act. So if that means I do 50 push-ups every day and my body's able to count on that as a release and an act of self-care, then it is. Like, it doesn't mean I go to the spa once and I don't ever go again. Do I go every single week so my body knows that the spa is where we will have the conversation, the convergence with the care that we need. And so as we talk about self-care, and we talk about community care, and as we talk about what do I need to be well, I would ask ourselves, how are we consistent in the answer? And how are we consistent in making sure that answer never has a delinquent kind of reality to it?
No, I love that. I absolutely love that. And consistency, and I would even go as far, well, for myself, routine in some ways, in some areas of life, you know, routine can be a savior. You know, if you already know I'm doing this from 3 to 6, or I'm doing this from 6 to 9, or you know that during the 6 to 9 time, you're going to wind down. That's your time to put yourself to bed. Like, there was a time in my life I was not putting myself to bed. I was just passing out. I was passing out, and I was quite content with it, because for some reason that gave me that told me, oh, you're doing a lot, so you're being productive. Lying to myself that if I pass out at the end of the night, I know I had a good day. No, you just ran yourself down. You didn't necessarily have a good day.
You were just ragged. You ran yourself ragged.
I was running myself so ragged. And you know, when I was living in Massachusetts, during the course of a day, I might have been at Barrington Stage, but earlier in the day I was working in Great Barrington, and it didn't have anything to right after. I might be teaching. I may have been substitute teaching if I wasn't doing another job. Like, I on, you know, I was doing what they were calling the Berkshire Shuffle, like keeping a few irons in the fire. And at the end of the day, the amount that I was exhausted was, for some reason, my gauge as to, you know, how I was not alive. You know?
And we always say, and we uplift this notion of being our ancestors' wildest dreams, which I believe that we are the embodiment of it. But how are we also activating what that dream is, right? I think that also this it comes up as I listen to your beautiful articulation that you're bringing into the space right now. Is that, like, we are the embodiment of our ancestors' wildest dreams, but how we activate that dream is the question, right? Because that dream could be to rest. That dream could be to not labor. That dream could be to go to the moon. That dream could be all those things. And how are we listening to the intuitive voice of that manifestation, right? If we actually truly believe that, and we actually name that, and we actually say, like, when I go into a room, I bring in 3,000 ancestors, like, minimum. Like, that's just what I do. But if that's what I'm, exactly. Exactly. And if that's what I'm doing at bare minimum, my question is then also, how am I responsible to the messages, the language, the history that they inform through me as a vessel? Because I sometimes don't think that we take the next step of saying, well, that's what is real, and we say that that's so that we have courage. Well, then my question would be, how are you listening to the courageous heartbeat that all of them collectively are asking you to be the conduit to?
I love that. I love it. And it's so funny you use the phrase our ancestors' wildest dreams. I've also been using my dreams to inform me in my next steps. And I've been connected with, other artists, other creatives that also see the importance of dreams. I just had a dream about my grandmother. She was mad at me about something. That could have been it. I'm not resting. I'm not offering a true manifestation of what that dream looks like because I'm running around, ripping and running. I mean, it's the summer. Maybe it's like a morning. I'm not teaching. I actually have been. I'm proud of myself for how I've been resting this summer. But I'm wondering if it's just school year's about to start. Don't forget about how you need to put the self-care. Don't have me out here looking crazy. Don't like maybe just in this conversation I'm like maybe that's what grandma was mad at me about because I could have lost sight of that and didn't realize it. And you just offered that wonderful and beautiful reminder. You gotta make sure that as the representation, we're not an embarrassment. We're not, out here looking crazy because we didn't take the time to rest. We didn't, that radical rest. Rest is action. They sound like they are two totally opposite things, but they are not. Rest is action. And I have had to remind myself of that a few times in the last year or two. And I think because, compared to the South personally, I'm moving at a quicker pace. I'm doing a few more things at the same time. I'm hopping on this train, get to this place, and this, that, and the third. And, I do need to remember after all of that, take care of yourself, take care of the information that is stored in your body, take care of the muscle memory, which those are two of my favorite words. Like take care of all of that because it's a gift. And you have to make sure that you not only take care of your gift, but you condition it and you protect it and you make sure that it is there for use, for longevity, for
Well, it's so beautiful about you talking about a gift. So like I was asked to write this. Are we off topic?
You are not. I'm about to steer y'all to one last question. So you say what you want to say, and then I got one more.
Okay. Because
I love this back and forth.
I was like, are we off topic? Because I could totally.
Not at all.
Okay,
I'm
great. Great. So I was asked to write this practice sharing for the Park Avenue Armory for their skill sharing that they're having later on this month. And as I was sitting there writing it, I was talking about, my practice. And I was like, that's not actually what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the death of imagination and how imagination is the salve in the midnight hour that we are fixated on wanting to have happen in this moment to heal us. Yet we're not investing in the restoration and the restorative practice of those who carry the gift to provide the space for us to witness. That the artists have to be invested in at an equitable space of understanding that they are helping to help our hearts be seen and our souls to be unfurled. And if they are doing that work, if they are being the gift givers of providing that space, how are we as a community creating the conditions, not to just celebrate them, but to participate in the reckoning of their own reclamation? And how are we creating the conditions if we want them, and how are we helping artists not to fall back and fall prey to the systematic hurt that we said we weren't going to do? Like, how are we creating false lessons, false representations of lessons learned? And how are we creating oases? And when I mean oasis, I don't mean a place without challenges or without obstacles. I mean a space that is centering care and love to go through the challenges and the obstacles. So it's not romanticizing the space of like life will be like roses, but it is saying that actually that, and it's something that's coming up also just a little bit about this lack of imagination, is like this lack of imagination of how we're still using tokenism as a mechanism of navigation and reward. And so when we think about all of that, the death of imagination becomes the next thing that happens, because if artists stop giving space to their bodies and to their hearts and their minds to imagine how we gather in the midst of two global pandemics, a war, I keep on saying this, and economic instability, then what are we giving, how are we solving the challenges and issues that are facing us today? If that is the call and the arms that we're saying that an artist has to do in order for this all to make sense to us. Because without that, we are living in a chaotic mechanism that we find ourselves in deep isolation. When did we start coming back to gathering? When we start hearing music in the streets, or when we started hearing live performance happening? When did we start to feel safe to like see each other? When we started being able to dance again, right? These are all creative outlets and creative mechanisms that art is generative and responsible for. So art is the salve that's coming in, and that's all built off of an imaginative practice of actually creating innovation, creating cultural sovereignty, and creating community. Like, that is what is happening. That is what artists are being the architects of in this moment. Yet, inside of being the responsors to and responsible for birthing imagination in this moment, they are also not being invested in and actually truly participated by in a society that is de-appreciating them.
I'm pulling these pieces together because you both are giving us a lot to chew on and think about. But I just want to say that both of you have said some wonderful things, specifically about time to consider the time we are in, right? For the organization, right? The listing of where we are at in the history of our world and our society. And naming that as an arts organization, acknowledging that. The artists to take time to see themselves and all the multifaceted parts of themselves and the communities they want to serve and want to be a part of and collaborate with. And then it's interrogation, asking those hard questions. Arts organizations and artists need to ask difficult questions about their self-care, about how they're not just, like you said, putting a quick Band-Aid on things, but sustaining the artist, giving them the space to not be, right? In order to create an artistic future that allows for art to flourish and to continue to heal the society and the place that we're in. And then lastly, I love what you were saying about you and Marla and Jonathan about, and then saying advocacy. How do I advocate for the things that now I've said, what do I need? And I've got to practice. Now, how do I go to or come in collaboration with an arts organization to then advocate and see alignment for that, right? Is the space doing that? And if it's not, how do I walk away? How do I say, no, that's not it? And so I put that to you both as an artist and as an arts organization. When someone is advocating for what they need as an artist and a creative, how do you support and serve that as an arts organization? And you, Marla, as an artist, individual, how would you like to be seen and heard when you are advocating for the things that you need to be your best creative self?
Marla, do you want to go first? Happy to. Okay, so what I'll just uplift and say is that in the moment of truly thinking about that need that is being requested, I think that the request is, how do I create the abundant lane for you to be seen and for you to feel the resources not of lack but of abundance. I think that like there is a deep need for arts organizations to start to understand how to create indigenous capitalism amongst the artists who are around them, versus Western capitalism, which is off of the building off the backs of individuals. That is what the Western world has been known for doing inside of their capitalistic exchange. However, I think that there are more intuitive, more indigenous, and more lucrative, actually, community-driven capitalistic models that can actually introduce a more sustainable practice for everyone in the room. So that might mean healthcare coming in a different kind of way. That might mean a self-care coming in a different kind of way. That might mean salaries showing up in a different kind of way. How are we creating indigenous capitalism for the communities that we're actually serving that is not respondent and not necessarily deemed qualified by the Western capitalistic movement that has systematically deappreciated humans? And so I think the request is I think for our institution is to ask first, create the conditions for the ask to happen, then to listen to that request completely. After they listen to that request, making the promise to actively create a blueprint to meet that request, and then to bring that blueprint back into the table and say, hey, I hear where you want to go. This is what I can do. Versus instead of not showing that plan back, like creating responsibility of communication and then activating on it, creating a shared blueprint where the person who asked for the request hears that they were heard. A blueprint where that even if they're heard, it might not mean that they get what they want. But I think that we live in a society where just to be heard goes a long way. And I think people cannot underestimate the power of listening and the power of being a witnesser.
Oh, that was awesome. And I heard a few words that just sort of were good words. You first said abundance, looking at it through a lens of abundance. And I really appreciate that because, as an educator, I really try to check myself when it comes to trying to meet the needs of the students and not necessarily think about their issues or learning difficulties as deficiencies, but as promises, and so that made me think about that when you said, looking at the resources, out of abundance instead of a need or lack. And it's really important because it's empowering, not only to be heard, but the ask. That is so important. I cannot think of the number of things that I've got myself into. And if I think about it, I would have to be honest with myself. They didn't ask me anything. They just was talking and I was involved in the talking. There was no formal ask. So I appreciate that. And there was another A word, I feel like you said, abundance, asking, and it was something else. The being heard is also good, or being seen is also good, but the actual act of seeing each other and recognizing that the resources that are available to me, or the connections that I'm making, the community members that I'm being introduced to, and that all comes together and it's connected for a reason. And it's really interesting. Like if I know who it is that I'm working with, and I know that they've been through a lot of the things that I've gone through, and that's where that's the spirit underneath everything that's involved in a project, or involved in working on and collaborating with others. Like, you just know the heart of the organization. And I still feel like, it's important to connect through those shared experiences, or anything that you can make a connection on. Like, even knowing some of the same people, it kind of gives you, a sense that it's not just about numbers. It's about an experience. It's about a movement. It's something so much bigger than just us as individual pieces. It's all of the parts coming together as a whole for the bigger picture. And so I would say that the ask is really important. What is it that I need? And then I need to know myself so that I can actually tell you what it is that I need. And through experiences and, through different situations, we have to really process and reflect on who we are so that we're not presenting the wrong person when we start to request these things, you know? And so I really appreciate you saying that, Jonathan, just making sure that we look at connecting as, part of like it out of abundance and not out of lack. You need to come to a situation already feeling blessed, already feeling like you have everything that you need. You were created to have everything that you need to use. We have all the tools that we need. We just need to tap into them. And we need to be around the right people, like-minded people that know how to activate. That was the other word, activate. Know how to activate that we already know that we have inside of us, because collaboration and man's connection to man is so important. It's so important because we're each other's missing pieces. We're not only just our ancestors' wildest dreams, but we're each other's missing pieces. And I was going to say something about being human glue earlier. Like the more you have a heart to make these genuine connections and do these authentic, have these authentic experiences, you become the glue that people need. And you recognize who the glue is in your life. So that's how I'll answer that question.
Y'all, listen, I'm looking at time. I know we have 4 more minutes. And so I also just want to acknowledge and make space and say I'm opening the floor for questions for both of these amazing panelists today, Marla and Jonathan. The things you have shared are so important and powerful. And I'm so surprised that we got it all in this amount of time. But I think that it comes from something that I will share, just like being in a position, like a mindset of wanting to share, being in and understanding there's enough. I have enough to share, that whatever time, even your time that you've given us, it could have, it could have been a different type of way, a conversation, but you took the time to be present and in the space. And so I also think about the posture of sharing, the posture of hospitality, and put that to you as my final question. I'm keeping an eye on the chat, but like in your next whatever, what posture are you seeking to take and show up for yourself?
Marla, I went first last time, so it's your turn. Go first.
Okay. When I think about sharing, the only thing I can think about is, as far as the posture I'm gonna take, it's just gonna be, I'm just gonna try to be humble. I just feel like, the older I get, the more important just humility is to me. And I hope that I am a little more trusting. You can't share with everyone. But at the same time, you never know how your story will help someone else, or how your experiences will help someone else. So I'm hoping to take a posture of just being open and humble. And also, I guess with that openness and humbleness, just more outspoken. I think that it's really important for me to acknowledge, the older that I get, that my voice is powerful. It is necessary. And because I used to hate the sound of my voice when I was younger, hated to hear myself. I don't know what it was, don't know. And still to this day, watching myself performing is still like, oh, I don't know why. But, you know, using my voice more freely as far as sharing, I feel is a posture that I should just be more free. So open, free, and humble. Yeah.
And I would just add, I love all of those, and I would just add, in my next sharing, I want to surrender more, in the act of surrendering. The more I surrender to source, the more I surrender to the goals and ambitions of the room, the more that I surrender my ego, the more and more I create space for something possible and palpable to happen. And I would just answer the question that's in the chat, right? I mean, the question I was given, what is the most creative thing, creativeness that I've learned during the pandemic? And I will say I've learned creatively how much space I need in order to thrive. I moved into an apartment by myself during the pandemic for the first time. I got to live by myself. And the notion of expanding into that much space with all of my ideas for the first time really provided me the quantum leap to understand that what I was doing before was limiting, and where I need to go is more expansive. And that I have to hold the expansive space that is necessary for me to really truly shine. So that was a creative investigation that allowed for me to like design my space, get a ton of plants, probably too many, who cares, it's mine. Buy clothes when I want to, how I want to, like all those things, leave something dirty, leave something clean. But all of that was really a part of the creative expansion that the pandemic provided.
Marla, anything to add to that question? I'll let you back.
Sure. Actually, that's very interesting because I had the reverse. I felt that I needed to make myself. I had a roommate during the pandemic. We were teaching from home. And I felt that I needed to, I'm tall, so I needed to get creative with how I not made myself small, but how did I play with expanding and contracting? And experimenting with stretching as well. I needed to stretch more, period. And I also needed to stretch my imagination a little bit as well. During that time, I felt that I needed to, that was the first time I did a live on Instagram. The first time that did I do a Facebook? I was doing a lot more stuff that I would care to do. So I really had to stretch my imagination around promoting myself during a time where, we had to stay inside. I really had to stretch my imagination around a few things, not just what did I think it meant for me to be well, but how did I need to restructure my process creatively? How do I experiment with, how to contract myself in a way, or contort myself in a way that kind of distorts my vision as far as certain types of choreography. So that was sort of what was going on with me. But then not after the pandemic, we're still dealing with a whole bunch of stuff, but then I would move to my own apartment. And so I had to readjust and really think about, now I have all this arm space, and if I stretch, I'm not going to hit the light up over my head. I sort of had the opposite experience, and then I had to sort of relearn some things about stretching, not just my imagination now, but now that I'm living by myself, stretching, actually stretching more and sprawling. Get those plants. Get all of the plants. All of them.
All of them. Give me all of them.
I have a backyard. I be putting my hands in some dirt. I'm killing plants and growing vegetables. I'm figuring it out because it's important.
2 plants are big, and I think I'm not sure, but we're gonna repot and pray. But yeah, get those plants, and yes, that's what I would say. I really had to think about my thoughts about expanding and contracting physically, mentally, spiritually first, mentally, then physically. Because I felt that I had those I had them in the wrong order at one point, and I needed to reconfigure the order. So, yeah.
Oh man, this is a dope question in the Q&A. I know I need to wrap it up, but I will, this is what I will say. I will respond to it and say, I think, yes, art is life and life is art. And I think we as a creative organization, as creative individuals, need to understand what is it necessary to be sustainable, have a sustainable life as an artist, and providing spaces for that. Marla, Jonathan, thank you. Thank you for all of those that you attended. Thank you for your beautiful questions. If you want to learn more about Arts Business Collaborative, please go to our website, which is www.artsbusinesscollaborative.org, to learn more about ABC. Our next program that's coming up is the Help Desk. We are providing free arts business consultations for individuals, for LLCs, for larger organizations, to help you birth that next step in your goals of your individual career or the career of your org. We want to be here to help. And so we are partnering with an organization called Creative Study to provide online courses, arts business courses, with consultants and educators, people of color. And our consultants are an amazing lineup of creatives who are also business consultants in finance, HR, and marketing, and they are also all people of color. We really do seek to support all communities, especially those of African American, and Latinx and Asian descent. So please find out more about ABC and the Help Desk at our website. That is artsbusinesscollaborative.org. Again, if you want to learn more about Jonathan and the National Black Theater, please, Jonathan, tell them where to go.
You can go to @NatBlackTheater, and that will get you everything you need to go on Instagram or Twitter, or you go to www.nationalblacktheater.org.
And if you want to learn more about Marla Robertson and her work, where should we go, Marla?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram, even though I can't believe I'm promoting that. I'm just like, you follow me on Instagram. If you want to learn more about Creole dance, you can go to creoledancecollective.com. And also, I respond to messages. I respond to, hey girl, how you doing? I do respond to that. I think that those are my sisters that ask those questions. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes.
I agree that art is life. But yeah, I think I'm pretty, easy to find. I don't have a website. I think I tried to create one a long time ago. I don't know what happened with that.
It's all right. I feel like everything's going to be in the metaverse eventually anyway. No one's going to go. It's okay. We're moving past that anyway. You'll catch up when we get there. Right. Thank you. And this ends our recording. We'll re-air this again soon. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Marla. Have a great evening.